So if everyone's ready, we would like to start. Welcome everyone to our meetup, Governance in a Digital Age and the Role of Blockchain. My name is Robert, but feel free to call me Robs. I'm part of the Staking Facilities crew, and me together with Julius, Wolfgang, who is somewhere down there, and Florian, we are hosting this event also with Sandra from Koru and great support from CDTM. Unfortunately, none of them is here tonight, but I want to make sure that this is on camera. Thank you very, very much for hosting us. It's always really, really tough to find a good location here in Munich, as most of you might know. And also thank you to the Landeshauptstadt München. There's also a representative somewhere in the rows over there. Thank you very much for sponsoring this evening. Always great to have the city on your side. And before we get started, I would like to inform you, as you might have already figured, that we are going to film this event. So if anyone is not okay with being filmed, just approach any of the organizers and we will make sure to cut you out. But we would really like to post this on our website and our YouTube channel, but feel free to say no. So let's get to it. As you might have already noticed, our title, Governance in a Digital Age and the Role of Blockchain, is quite buzzwordy. And now you might rightfully wonder, okay, how do things like governance, digitization, blockchain, how do these fit together? But we are here because we are convinced that there's quite a good fit here. Let's take a closer look. So governance, in a very broad definition, means or refers to any kind of actions and manners of governing or simply running a community, a company, an organization, or even a whole country. And with every new election, this becomes a hot topic year and year, time and time again. Just look at the recent European elections. There were so many ideas and opinions of how the European should be run. Some good ideas, some bad ideas. We're not here to judge this tonight. Another really cool example, also from the European Union, or cool is up to debate as well, is the GDPR, which is basically a legal framework and European position of how entities collect, process your personal data, entities such as Google, Amazon, or Facebook, just to name a few. And this already goes to show that governance and digitization become heavily intervened nowadays. And now in terms of governance, you might think, hey, Germany has quite a solid form of governance. In terms of digitization, we might not be pioneering the space, as this post by one of our speakers sums up quite nicely. But, well, there happens to be a chance for Germany to change that, enter blockchain technology. And I'm sure you all heard the term before, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here. Even the CDU-CSU recently published a paper, I think 2 weeks ago. Facebook, it was all over the news, they want to launch a blockchain-based payment system next year. See how that works out. And universities, just like TUM, start offering courses on it also. So it's really, really hard not to come across the term these days. But we think that one core component of this technology is often overlooked, and that is governance. Tonight we would like to change that, and therefore we would to discuss with our speakers, but also with you, what this can bring to the table and how this will affect the way we work and interact together. And we want to do this in a slightly different manner, which Sandra will let you know.
So, hi, also welcome from my side. My name is Sandra, and I'm working with entrepreneurs and with leadership teams on enhancing their collaboration and their strategies in order to meet the challenges of the future. And my background is in organizational psychology and strategy, and I'm working with teams to enhance self-organization and with self-organized organizations, and therefore I'm very interested in the role blockchain can play in this to support it. And maybe you wonder how we met and why we are doing this meetup together. Last year we initiated a project called Center of Decentralization, where the Stadt München also supported us very nicely. And we wanted to create a physical hub where all the blockchain initiatives and startups can come together. But as Rob's already said, finding a location for one evening is already difficult. Finding a location to work in, it's even more difficult. So we decided early this year that we stop looking for a location and we concentrate on the content side. So I think this is my phone. And this is why we started this Meetup series. And we want to put the perspective not only on the technology side, but also on an organizational, on a legal, and on a business application perspective. And therefore, we are also very happy to have our 4 speakers here tonight. And we are doing the meetup a little bit differently. So we have 3 parts. So first are the 15-minute presentations per speaker. And in the second part, you already see the numbers in the corners. We have so-called deep dive sessions where you can decide which is the topic which you are most interested in, and you join the speaker of your choice. This will also be around 20 to 30 minutes. And then in the end, we have a panel discussion. And I think Rob's prepared a Slido where you can post all your questions also during the presentations. And we can then answer the questions at the end as well.
And all the questions that we don't get to answer tonight, we will try to answer them later on and post them on MeetUp or in any of our channels. So feel free to visit Slido and enter the code to play along. Now let's get started.
Yeah. So, but before we start, well, now you know about us, and we would like to know a little bit more about you, our audience tonight. And I would like to know from you who considers themselves as entrepreneurs, who is working in a, let's say, established company. And who is a blockchain novice? Okay, quite a few. And who is a blockchain savant, so very deep into blockchain topics. Okay, perfect. And who is just here for the free drinks and sandwiches? Okay, thank you. So it's always good to know who is sitting in front of you. Thanks a lot, Rebecca.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to be here. It was no problem because I pretty much spend lots and lots and lots of time thinking about governance and drafting governances. During my day job, I'm actually working for Datarella. We're a blockchain solutions provider for industry, and I work there as a blockchain architect and basically do a lot of requirements engineering. I kind of come from the opposite side that Marcus comes. So he was an engineer and became a lawyer. I was an economist and became an engineer. So that's what I do during my day job, but I'm also involved quite heavily with the European Blockchain Association and was one of the founders actually of the association. And what I'd like to talk to you guys today about is on one side, sort of what we've built in the European Blockchain Association that builds on the legal structures that Marcus was telling us about. And also a little bit about the logic behind what governances are possible, why we need a governance, and from a socio-technical perspective, sort of what the interplay between humans and machines is in our world on a kind of a macro level, and how that influences governance. The European Blockchain Association is actually a German club, an EV for those of you who come from here, and so we're anchored in German law, and on top of that have built up a governance for the association. And the goal of the European Blockchain Association is simply to coordinate the activities of entrepreneurs, of corporates, of universities and educational institutions across this space, because we basically observed that everybody's out there building lots of stuff, but not always talking to one another about what they're building, and not always building together and exchanging information about what's going on there. So I think what we maybe need now is a couple of baseline assumptions. I'm going to jump into it at a little bit higher level, asking kind of the question, why governance at all? And there's some basic assumptions about how humans work that are important here. So people need tools. We've been using tools since we discovered fire and started clearing land and doing agriculture, and we've continued to build tools. And those tools we also call then technology. Importantly, the tools that we build actually change how we think and how we move through the world. And how we think influences the tools that we build. So it's kind of a bit of a circle. Another really important aspect that I think is coming into vogue, let's say, but for a long, long time, we technologists had it in our heads that we could just go out there and build technology and that it was maybe neutral. And what we're finding is that it's not neutral. It's very important how we build, what we build, because if we just build, it's very likely that the technologies that we build will become antisocial. What you see here is an illustration of the social credit score in China. There's lots of other examples of technologies that we've kind of adopted wholesale and then have gone awry. But blockchain is no different. We look at this like, okay, this is kind of a silver bullet and a really, really awesome thing for society. And there's a lot of possibilities that it brings up. But I think without governance, it's a really, you've got some real problems there that could come up in the future. And specifically, the main thing that we're trying to address, I think, in governance at a deeper level than just the legal structures, is that we're trying to address problems that we don't know yet what the problems are. So the challenge of governance is build a structure that somehow fits into a legal structure, that you can maybe have a bank account, for instance, and that at the same time has the capability to change itself in the future, given constraints that you don't yet know, and a technical basis in code, for instance. So really, what is governance? It's a technical means of managing social interactions, and it's a way that we solve our problems in our social space and organize ourselves using technical means. And that's really what we're seeing with DAOs and with all of the blockchain tools that we have, are attempts to sort of unite economic theory and incentive structures with the technical possibilities that we have. And so what we've sort of the paradigm that we've been working on in the European Blockchain Association and how our governance is built up is after the level that Marcus was talking about, after the level of having a legal structure that's actually able to have a bank account, is actually able to be represented by a person, then we've got some high-level principles, and slowly, one after the other, more granular and more granular and more granular procedures for how actually to get stuff done. And what this chart here is showing is the interplay between people and technology. So you have people that write the governance. We have lawyers, we have people like me, other people inside the association that are actually contributing to governance, maybe making pull requests to our GitHub, and writing into code, if you will, what the procedures are. And then you have some technologies. In the case of actual blockchain networks, you're maybe writing protocol layers on top of that. And those technologies people are then using. We're building tools, and those technologies are then influencing how it is that people are actually thinking about their daily lives. They're thinking about what a wallet is. They're thinking about what their identity is. They're thinking about what their social interactions are. And that changed thought is then flowing, hopefully, back into the governance of the technical systems. And the idea is to stop these runaway systems where you build some technology that you can't control anymore, and it starts changing everybody's brains in a sort of runaway way. So I don't know if you guys have seen these Russian nesting dolls before, Matryoshka. That's basically how it's built up. At the very core is this idea that you need some kind of legal basis, and then beyond, and that is anchored actually in contractual law. And then beyond that, you've got things like principles, like what should the organization do? Should we build software that promotes child slavery? Yes, no. So we set some assumptions about things that are actually really important. Do we want to track political dissidents with this software? Do we stand for privacy by design? Those sorts of things. And set those into principles. And once you've got that, then you can go deeper and deeper and say, okay, who are the members? Who are the actors? What are the protocols? Who's allowed to do what? Which working groups do you have? Which maybe more informal organizations do you have within your organization that have lighter permissions, let's say? All the way down to like how are you administering your actual tech, and who is allowed to get requests or get polls, things like that. And so this is actually a picture of the governance. So it's relatively long. You guys can all go online and check it out at EuropeanBlockchainAssociation.org, and you're all welcome to join the association and also to contribute directly to the governance on GitHub. And these are this kind of cascading layers of governance that we've got built up in there. So at the top you've got this idea of something that's actually anchored in law, and then below that you've got the principles, and then all of the procedures. And the other thing is that if you the idea with the principles and why that's important is that allows you to address unseen problems that come later. So if I'm in a working group or I'm building out some blockchain protocol and I come to an ethical question that just isn't addressed anywhere, or I come to a dispute that isn't addressed anywhere, then I can go up 3 levels. We also have a dispute resolution body, the Blockchain Arbitration Forum, that is able to handle smart contract-based disputes as well. And I can look back to high-level concepts about what actually did we want to be doing, and is the thing that we're actually doing what we wanted to be doing. So in the discussion that we have a little bit later, we can go a little bit further if you'd like. I thought a little summary here from Nick Carter about the different blockchains and which kinds of governance models they have would be a great jumping off point, because depending on how the crypto economic structures and the game theoretic structures are set up, there's different economic models and different governance models in each of the blockchains that you may be familiar with. And I've set up also so diagrams of not each of the blockchains up here, but a number of the blockchains, so we can go through many other governance models besides just those in the EBA. Thank you very much.
And now we have Max Semenchuk as our speaker, and he has probably the longest journey today because he just arrived from Kiev just to join us tonight for this presentation. So please give him a warm welcome.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here. Max, before I start, 2 words about me. So I usually work on the intersection between innovation and coordination. I like to build innovative organization and organize to build innovative stuff. So the first company, which is on the list, used to be my main position, and we had a 2-year journey on self-organization with Holacracy, which enabled me to work in 6 other organizations, one of which I would be presenting today, called DGov Foundation. So that's a bit about me. And DGov stands, of course, for distributed governance. This is probably the most used picture in the blockchain space, right? So whenever somebody asks me, like, what's DGov? DGov, of course, is a term, but it also has several layers of work. Like, in the more general sense, it's a movement of people who want to build new types of organizations, networks. Like, we have many people that are kind of come into the space because of the promises of this better types of organization, anti-corruption, freedom, and so on. On the other level, it's like community and network. So we have people working together, knowing each other. And then also this is the foundation, that the body that we created in order to support this movement and the network. And by the way, just check, like, who knows what DIO is? Oh, that's good. So what we try and, like, what questions we address when we're talking about DGov, mostly it's how should we govern the networks and, like, principles, and currently crypto law is becoming one of the interesting aspects of it, like what laws should govern it and so on, how decentralized we should be, like should we focus on efficiency or else. And the more technical aspect is what tools do you want to use. Like, we talk a lot about voting, but voting, to be honest, is only like a part, maybe a small part of the governance, because voting is like what happens like at the event, but you like nobody sees the work of previously like signaling about the sentiment that's happened, that something needs to be changed, the development of the proposals, the dispute resolution, and so on. And we have many like tools that try to solve this and like small specific problems, but we always need to look at the general level. So why do we do that overall? So if you know about the DAO, probably you learned it from the DAO of 2016, like hack and all of that. I came into the space like around that time, really inspired about the idea of these future organizations that promise like we're gonna like kill VCs and everybody will be investor and so on, and then this dramatic hack that kind of for a year there was almost no work, or it seemed like no work was done in that direction because everybody was kind of pessimistic and we saw that we are not ready and so on. But the last year was pretty crazy in terms of DIO development. So a couple of news, maybe you heard about them, maybe not. So Dash is one of the oldest organizations that is really putting like funds into their governance, and every month they distribute 800,000 through their voting processes. And funny fact, once they had a proposal, like not too long ago, about firing the CEO that was also put on the chain. So it wasn't, it didn't pass. And like politically, we can consider it from different perspectives. But the idea that it was possible to run this proposal overall, I find it pretty cool. Then we had a like $1 billion EOS coming with their more efficient system, as they frame it, and from some perspectives it worked. And they also received lots of critics from the more decentralized like minded specialists about the possibility of vote buying, and also that they had this pretty old system. They issued some rules and not everybody could accept these rules, and they lost some funds because of it. But in any case, it's also one of the biggest experiments in the space. Then we have a smaller but more organic and interesting community of a company called DAOstack. It's called DAOstack Genesis. So this is a group of around 100 people, and they distribute roughly 10K or 50K per month on different community projects. And this is, I consider that it's working pretty well because besides their holographic consensus mechanics used for signaling which proposals are most supported, they also use a lot of soft governance methods. And they attracted specialists on that, and I think it's more live approach. And this is overall one of the biggest problems. The level of participation is really low. That's what we run into, that even 10% is considered to be a pretty high participation. Like Ethereum and Aragon got only around 3% in the first votings. So this is like the idea that we just allow everybody vote doesn't translate into everybody would really vote. So this is kind of an interesting problem to solve, how we make the governance when people are just overwhelmed with information. The another cool project is Aragon, which launched the network. They were like practicing governance and distribution of funds. So they received, I don't know, around $100 million during their fundraising campaigns. And instead of hiring I don't know, 1,000 developers or so, they keep the small team and they distribute their funds in the like programs. This year they launched their network, and the promise of the network, and that's something they will be rolling out later this year, is the court, like on-chain court. They will help to resolve relations between DAOs. And Wilkos has also Clarus that's working in this field, but I think with the come of Aragon, that would be like when you have this platform. If you don't know, Aragon is a platform for creating DAOs in an easy way. Like you can do that like in 3 minutes. So you would register your DAO instead of, I don't know, any offshore company or something, and then you can even legally go into legal relations or some other relations with other companies, and you can initiate disputes if you need. Oh gosh, like so many things happened, like MakerDAO, Moloch DAO that received like more than $1 million just for donations from the space to improve the state of Ethereum and so on. We have so many DAOs, like I hear about new DAOs created like 5 DAOs per week or something. We even initiated something called DAO Incubator to help develop these solutions. So this is just a small overview of the market from the companies that produce technology for the governance, only on-chain, I mean. And overall, like even for me, this like considered myself as a specialist in this space, keeping up with what all of them do, all the experiments they do, you know, this is pretty hard. And what's getting even harder is like most of them are not collaborating toughly, like they don't collaborate much between each other. So they built not interoperability systems. So this is quite a problem. And in the space where we're trying to build bridges and we want to be one network, it's quite tension for us, and that's why we're coming here to solve this. And this is basically the core group of the DGov. So you can see the names, and also you can like left to right. It's Phoebe UK, Anya Slovenia, team in Ion are from Berlin, and I'm from Ukraine. And we started to do this stuff since the last year Ethereum community conference, when we understand we want to do some kind of event or conference like this. For example, on governance, we wanted to connect people from all over the Europe and the world, and to start working together on that. It's also like pretty close to what Rebecca said before. So we want to build scalable, scalability is one of the interesting aspects of this distributed governance system, and we want, as a metric for our success, is the amount of cohesion we get through this collaboration. So what we do currently, how we solve that. So we run meetups, and not all meetups we run ourselves. We have people initiating meetups just spontaneously, and we had for like last year more than 20 meetups from New York, Caribbean islands, London. Most of them happen in Berlin, Paris, and so on. So we just get together with people who are interested in this topic, and we talk about like what's happening and how we can work together on that. We have kind of bigger events like councils. We had one in Berlin in the start of the year, where for 2 days we have a full agenda of topics, and we tried to integrate cross-domain experts. We had many lawyers, we had economists, engineers, academics working in the space to talk to each other and kind of exchange this perspective. Because what's really happening is that engineers that are working in this space, they're trying to reinvent the wheel. They start learning about law or economics, and we kind of see that with the help of people from this space, it will be more successful. Like the system they will build will be more successful. The closest event we're going to do is during Web3 Summit in Berlin, 19 to 21st August. We will have a specific space dedicated to DGov questions, and for 3 days we're going to go through philosophy, law, mechanics, and soft governance topics of distributed governance. And we also have a monthly newsletter where we overview whatever happened in the space, gather news from all of our members, which are more than 400 now. And we also have small Telegram chat where we have sometimes pretty hot discussions on whenever Libra comes or something else. There's lots of interesting perspectives popping out there. Another direction of the work is the research. So we have this wiki type system where we gather, first of all information on all the players from this field, and also the case studies. So whatever I mentioned about EOS, Tezos, Dash, Aragon, we have some case studies already published there. So if you want to quickly dive in on what's happening, you might want to check it out. We also have a quite fresh forum where we have a place for discussion. We also want to practice what we preach and use this approaches in our work internally. So, for example, we use Holacracy for our internal operations. We support this DAO incubator initiative, and we're gonna be launching our experiment that will be called Seed DAO around funding and signaling inside our own network. And yeah, we work closely with the research groups and the legal groups to this is just a list of legal groups if you're interested, like how many working groups are there that trying to solve this legal blockchain problem. So we're trying to keep up with that. So these are the ways you can engage with us. Most essential way would be to go to DGov.Foundation, where you can sign up to get all this interesting stuff we gathered for you. Participate in our chats and forums, find the specialists who are super motivated and inspired by all this movement. And yeah, also if you would be interested to do more meetups about DGov in Munich, let me know. I think that's about it. That's also my contacts if you would have any questions. If you would like to find somebody or know somebody from the space, feel always free to ping me and I'll try to connect you or help you. I think we would have questions, right, in the end. But yeah, thanks so much.
Yes, thank you very much, Sandra, and also the other speakers for the really nice presentation. Once again, my name is Julius. I'm representing staking facilities today. And I'm going to put blockchain governance into context with traditional governance systems. So just a quick introduction in what we do at staking facilities. So we are basically investing and researching blockchain projects. The second part of our business is basically operating infrastructure for those blockchains. And that are actually the projects we are planning to work with right now or working with. And the third part, and that is kind of what I'm going to talk about today, is community work, meetups, and of course governance itself, because we also participate in governance as a company. So 3 types of governance that I want to compare today. Traditionally, corporate governance. So for example, Facebook's updates software, how do they do it? Then I'm going to look into public governance, means states, how do they organize? And last but not least, I'm going to try to put blockchain governance into context with those 2 and kind of compare regarding those 4 points. The first is going to be consensus. How is consensus reached? What are the incentives of the organization? How is information distributed? And what is the actual structure of the governance process? So first of all, I'm going to start with corporate governance. And I'm just going to give you like a basic overview. And I know there are different types of corporates, but I'm just going to do it like a basic overview. So governance or consensus in corporates is reached in a pretty centralized hierarchy way. So basically you have a group of people or one guy actually who is deciding, and the decision goes top down to the company. And that makes the consensus pretty fast and efficient, because you only have a few guys that you have to get along with, and it makes it pretty fast. Most of the corporates that I'm referring to right now are driven by profit, so you're trying to maximize impact in the market, and your infrastructure that you're providing, for example, Facebook, is permissioned in a way that you control who is accessing it, and you control the software. Information that you put out about your company is much about your values, your interests. So if you update your software, it's going to be pretty intransparent. A good example will be an Apple update or new software. It's pretty hard to look into the details and understand what actually happens with your data in the background. The structure, once again, completely similar to consensus. It's top-down, hard to change because the people in charge would probably not give up their power. And a few interest groups are actively participating. For example, as a user of Facebook, you won't have any chance to participate in some kind of software updates. Yeah. So secondly, I'm going to look into public governance. And consensus is reached a bit differently. So for example, in Germany, we have a representative democracy. So every person has basically one vote. We vote a council of people that represent our position. That is in fact pretty decentralized. A lot of people are involved in the process, and that makes the process really ineffective and slow, because as you know, some decisions or electives take a lot of time to pass, but the incentives in a way are completely different. So a government or governance for governments is there to facilitate cooperation, to mediate between a lot of different shareholders and also integrate minorities, and create a public infrastructure for exchange. Information is really diverse. In times of fake news, it's sometimes hard to grasp which information is to trust, and information is also sometimes really intransparent, also regarding processes. Some of the processes are really complicated, and it's hard to understand how certain decisions were made. Regarding governance structure itself, the processes, as some of you may know, are really explicitly defined and complex, so it's really hard to understand. Those processes have to grasp or combine a lot of different interest groups, also minorities. And they're really hard to change. I think that's pretty clear. Governance processes don't change really often. So the third part is blockchain governance. Just a short summary. It's just a really basic overview. It's not that detailed, but on the basic, you have the technology layer, the protocol layer, where the infrastructure is operated in public, permissionless blockchains all over the world, operated by different players. For example, we as stacking facilities would be one of those node operators. On the top of that, you have that application layer. That means you can build applications on the top of it. You can build Facebook on top of it. You can build a decentralized identity on top of it. And the core features of a blockchain and I'm talking about a public blockchain right here. It is immutable. It is censorship resistant, decentralized or distributed. There's not one entity in control of it. And it is public and accessible for everyone. And all information in the blockchain is transparent. So now we have this really cool new thing, decentralized, distributed, no one in control, but the question is, if no one owns it, who governs it? So in blockchain, we have basically two different kinds of governance, and some of the speakers already talked about it. It's basically off-chain governance. For example, that would be Bitcoin and Ethereum right now. And then we have on-chain governance, which means you are actually voting on the protocol layer itself. So first of all, if you put it into context, how is consensus reached in off-chain governance protocols? It's pretty centralized. I would say it's semi-centralized because you have few interest groups who are actually involved in the process. So you have mainly developers, you have miners, you have community leaders. For Ethereum, it would be comparable to Vitalik Buterin. And you have businesses who build on top. So there are few groups actually building on it, but contribution to updates or software updates are publicly. Incentives is always, or should be in the most cases, it is network success. Because if you push an update or a software update that really hurts the network, or users will switch to another blockchain, and that would be not good for the value of your coin and for the network itself. But the incentives are completely different between those groups. For example, miners maybe want higher fees, but devs want lower fees to have more, to be able to compute more complex computation. So it really depends, and it's sometimes not really on one page. Information as a non-techie person, if you're not in the community, is really intransparent and fragmented, because it's really hard to understand what really happens in those groups actually building on working on a software update. So information about those updates is fragmented and in some way intransparent. The structure itself, as I already said, is semi-centralized, so you have a group that actually pushes one update. It is open for contribution on several networks, and one of the famous software updates that most of you know, or some of you may know, is the Bitcoin forks. So what actually happened, you had Bitcoin with one software, and there were a group of people who said, we need to update the software of Bitcoin. So what happened? They took the software of Bitcoin and overrode it with some new features. And since a larger group of the Bitcoin network didn't agree with the new features, the blockchain basically split. And now we have the Bitcoin blockchain, which is the old chain. And for example, Bitcoin Cash would be a fork of the old Bitcoin chain. The next part is on-chain governance. So once again, on-chain governance means the voting process is integrated in the protocol itself. So you're actually doing the vote on the blockchain. You can compare it to a traditional shareholder voting. In most cases, that's just a basic overview. There are special cases, and I think Rebecca already mentioned that she's going to go into detail in some of the specific projects. But basically, you can say 1 coin, 1 vote. Compared to 1 person, 1 vote, you have 1 coin, 1 vote. And the vote itself is happening on the protocol level. The problem with that is that the incentives focus on the needs of the token holders, because the only persons who are able to participate in governance are people who hold tokens. For example, if you're a user of the network or a developer, you not necessarily need to have tokens, but you're a big part of the community. So it's hard for you to actually participate in the process itself. Incentives are also conflicting. A VC who holds a lot of tokens has other incentives as someone who is actually running a business on the blockchain. Information is in that case really transparent, because in order to put a new proposal for an update of the software to the network, you actually have to write it down and put it on the blockchain itself. So everyone can read it and can see the changes, can control it. And the information about, or the feeling about the proposal is actually discussed off-chain. So you have the normal channels, GitHub, where you can contribute. You have all kinds of forums, channels. And the actual vote itself then happens on the blockchain. Information is still fragmented. That's something that we also realized. It's hard for our customers to really understand what people from different groups actually think about some kinds of proposals. So that's also something that needs to improve. So the structure itself, 1 token, 1 vote, means if I have 10 tokens, I have 10 votes. It's comparable to shareholder voting. And that also implies the risk of plutocracy, which means if I have a lot of tokens, I have a lot of power in the network. That is not always bad, because if you think of it, if you have a lot of shares in the company and you want to hurt your own company, well, you can try it, but I don't think it will help the value of your shares. So takeaways. There's not one single blockchain governance, and that's something that Rebecca already mentioned. So there are different kinds of blockchain governance, and people are trying to figure out which ways are actually working and which suit the best for certain cases. Blockchain governance is extremely flexible and adaptive. That means if you have a governance structure that can actually change by a proposal itself, so you can basically change the governance structure, you're pretty flexible to adopt to environmental changes or economic changes. And it opens one really completely new option, and it is competitive governance. That's something that is not there right now, because if I'm in Germany and I don't like the German governance system, I have no choice to say, I'm moving to France because I like the governance system more. But if I'm working on a blockchain or I'm using a blockchain and I feel like, my vote is not really represented in the right way, I can switch to another blockchain with another governance model where I feel like my vote is better represented. So it completely opens a new field of competition in governance itself. And that makes governance really an evolving structure. So it has the opportunity, or opens up the opportunity, to rethink and rebuild existing governance systems. But there's still risks. I already mentioned it. Risk of plutocracy. There are some ideas to tackle it. For example, if you have a digital identity on a blockchain, you can link it to an account. That would be something where you can basically say one account has 1 vote. That would be an option. On-chain governance is still in its infancy, so we're really in the early days. There's a lot of happening right now. There's not a lot of stress testing. There are a lot of questions, for example, how do I incentivize people to really develop the core system of a protocol? Because if I don't have a company who pays the people, who is actually paying the people? And then the last question, it kind of goes along with the risk of plutocracy. Is coin voting really the way to go? Because we have the risk of people with a lot of financial power to take over systems. So that's also some questions that we can discuss in the mini group. I think there's a lot that blockchain governance enables. It enables us to rethink governance as a system, and has the opportunity to change structures that we think are there for a long time. Yeah, that's basically it. If you want to reach out to me, I'm here the whole evening. You can contact me by email. I also have Twitter. Just come to me and talk to me, and also the other guys from Staking Facilities who are in the back. Yeah, thank you very much.
So now I think the remaining people would be interested what happened in the other groups. So I would like to know from you what was the main discussions you had, and maybe the major questions or the most interesting questions from your point of view. Who wants to start?
I have the mic? So we actually discussed a lot of risks that were or are kind of connected to the connection between the kind of the real world to the blockchain. We discussed a lot about Sybil attacks regarding voting processes, for example, that you register a lot of addresses and vote multiple times. We discussed a lot about how new projects like Libra could affect the existing market, and also topics where there's still problems with the connection between or let's say some problems that blockchain itself can't really solve, and discuss which kind of things don't make sense to put on the blockchain and which things do make sense. So kind of the risks and of blockchain itself.
We started with finding the understanding of what DAO is, and it's always a problem because there's no one shared understanding, and it's always we need to set up our terms before we start the discussion. And then we were like discussing why we want DAOs in the first place. Is it the transparency, autonomous factor, or what it is that makes us work into this direction? And then how the big organization like BMW can be transferred into networks, and how we can have this already working organizations like Consensus that are building meshes between lots of internal companies, and use this DAO-like mechanics for decreasing the managerial costs and increasing transparency.
I think we spoke mostly about the limits of governance in general and human bias. So as technologists, we're always building things, and we're always building them from our own perspectives, and our biases get baked into the technologies that we're building. And we also talked for quite a while about how blockchain, and specifically blockchain-based on-chain and off-chain governance could contribute to the human race, let's say, contribute to improving the systems that we're using in other areas of life, as this technology starts to spread out through the ecosystem.
So we had a very intense discussion on the question whether we really need a legal framework, or whether we cannot just create our protocol and have all the participants work with the protocol. And well, we didn't really find a solution on that question, but so I think one of the solutions was that a legal framework grants security to all the participants, and it might be much more acceptable to the participants once you have a legal framework and don't only work on protocol level. But on the other side, of course, you need an implementation which a technical implementation which complies with the legal framework to make the legal framework enforceable by the protocol layer.
Okay, thank you. So Rob's had a look through the questions we had so far from you. So there were quite a lot. And I got the information that most of them were answered in the deep dive sessions. And but what he offered, he will look at all the questions you had and come up with some answers to them and send them around in the MeetUp group. So Rob's, is it next week or? Perfect. Thanks a lot in advance. So are there any questions from your side which are still open?
Feel free to stay for another beer and we can discuss it more.
So I would have one question to you, Markus. Do you think that the legal framework can be also adopted for the public blockchains in the future?
Well, the thing, and we discussed that earlier, the thing with the public blockchains is that they are not regulatable. Because since the nodes and miners, etc., are located in so many countries, in theory or in practice, there is no way to regulate this. So even if Germany said tomorrow that Bitcoin mining is forbidden, so nothing will happen, because then more miners will work in Asia or whatever. So the idea is probably not to try to regulate blockchain on a national level, but to find an international consensus on things like blockchain.
Okay. Do you think this is possible?
Well, we have the EU, and the EU is a wonderful instrument to regulate on a broader level. And I think there will never be a country which will forbid the blockchain technology as itself, but perhaps use cases. Perhaps, I mean, if the use case is illegal, it's of course not allowed to do that use case. And what I think is, I mean, we have a legal framework here, and this legal framework allows us to use blockchains, and this will be so in future too. So the question is only, will I pursue a use case which is forbidden? But this is not the case. And Bitcoin is totally legal here. This is, even the BaFin says that Bitcoin is legal.
Great. So if there are no questions anymore from your side, I think we will close the official part and continue with the network. And before we go, I see Rob has some presents for our speakers.
Thanks for you guys for showing up and talking to us. And yeah, we can continue I hope we can continue the discussion on the one or another beer. I think we still have some snacks, so would be great to discuss some more. I think there were some great talks already in the mini groups, and I think there's a lot of stuff to talk about some more. So yeah, thanks from our side that you all showed up. I think it was great. Yeah, and hopefully we'll have another meetup in the next time. So yeah, thanks for you guys for showing up, and yeah.
And thanks so much to the organizers for doing this. Let's
Perfect. Then I would say off to beer and drinks. Perfect.